Salutations, and hello to everyone who's watching this. Since my last fireside chat in respect to the subject regarding our present controversy, as related to the pharmaceutical industry in Silicon Valley, influencing government policies all over the world in the name of consolidating more control over the modes and means of production and more wealth under the guise of a global pandemic, would you look at that? Tens of thousands of truckers, Canadian truckers, in response to government-imposed V mandates, have decided to withhold their labor, occupy the Canadian capital of Ottawa, and shut down the Ambassador Bridge linking Windsor, Canada to Detroit, Michigan, which sees a quarter of all international trade pass through. This is no trifle matter. This is one of the largest labor revolts in recent history. The Liberals and the Progressives absolutely detest these measures and this protest. They claim these truckers are motivated by selfishness, not being concerned with public health. They're not working class. They're petty bourgeois capitalists. They are conspiracy theorists. They are motivated by racism and misogyny and bigotry. There's elements of fascism interwoven in what appears to them to be manufactured outrage when all quote-unquote normal and respectable people believe in science sponsored by capitalist think tanks and universities, believe everything that corporate media tells them, and that goes for the Fox News crowd as well, and believe that the government officials who work on behalf of special interests and corporate lobbyists, not on behalf of democracy and the bought and owned medical establishment, quote-unquote, experts, are truly and sincerely looking out for their best interests. On the flip side, you have the people on the so-called right who are comparing these public health measures executed by out-of-touch, limousine-riding, bought and sold, smug, elitist liberal officials to actions that would be executed by so-called communist states. Some comparisons have been made by these rightfully alienated social reactionaries, comparing Justin Trudeau to Fidel Castro. I will address the people on the so-called right first. To those people, I will say this. Justin Trudeau never led workers of Canada into an armed revolt which proceeded to evict foreign influences, and in Canada's case, it's both the British Crown and Wall Street, which monopolize all the important land, resources, minerals, fresh water, gold, copper, timber, iron, agriculture, foodstuffs, and social existence. Yes, and social existence out of Canada. Did he do that? No. Justin Trudeau is a generational politician, the son of Pierre Trudeau. He's basically the Andrew Cuomo of Canadian politics. What exactly makes Justin Trudeau a communist if he works on behalf of private capital and continues to shape Canada in accordance to the profit motives of private capital and answers to a queen who lives some 5,361 kilometers away from Ottawa? That is not communism, folks. That is corporate monarchism. And Justin Trudeau is not a Marxist. He is a monarchist. Do you really think Fidel Castro would allow for Cuba's natural resources to be monopolized by interests related to the Bank of International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, Wall Street, and London? Do you really think that Fidel Castro would allow for capitalist-controlled global entities like the World Economic Forum, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations to tell him and the Communist Party of Cuba how to run Cuba? Do you really think Cuba was asking for Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna for an extra supply of COVID shots, even when Cuba developed their own shot with no mandate because there's no financial incentive involved? Let me ask you this question. Who was the target of some 683 attempts on their life by the CIA? Was it Justin Trudeau or was it Fidel Castro? I'll give you 5 Mississippi to think about this. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Why, that was Fidel Castro. Do you know why? Because Fidel Castro refused to cave to the bullying, the intimidation, and the constant efforts by who you call the globalists, because you refuse to blame capitalism for any reason, as you are still addicted to that Cold War free market anti-authoritarian, anti-government Kool-Aid that Ronald Reagan and Milton Friedman poisoned your minds with, to sabotage the communist country of Cuba, owned by the people of Cuba, for the people of Cuba. Justin Trudeau and Fidel Castro are not in the same ballpark. They're not even in the same stadium. But what would you know when you blame communism and the concept of a state for every problem we have ever had when Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, the Walton family, the Bush family, the Rockefeller family, the Rothschild family too, the Vatican, that means Pope Francis, Prince Charles, and the rest of the rotten 1% bourgeois scum who you call globalists have never been communists, and were never communists, and won't ever be communist. Stop taking everything that Tim Pool and Luke Rudikowski say at face value. And this isn't me being some random socialist person on the internet who's calling them out like all the other woke left idiots do. No. 10 years ago, when I was doing independent journalism via Occupy Wall Street as a live streamer, I was on a first name basis with Tim Pool and Luke Rudikowski, okay? They didn't know or understand what they were talking about half the time during Occupy Wall Street a decade ago, and they still don't know what the hell they're talking about half the time today. Yes, they got half the story right. They are indeed very shady cabals of bourgeois scum who meet behind closed doors, away from media scrutiny, mostly in Switzerland. By the way, this is media that they own, for the record, and plot stratagems and narratives which will enable them to consolidate more wealth and power at the expense of the global working class. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the stuff that Occupy Wall Street tried to warn the public about 10 years ago, only to have that message brutally crushed by the Obama administration and redirected to fall in line with progressive politics that do not threaten the bottom line of the 1%. Where they got half the story wrong, they redirect the focus away from collective working class and petty capitalist anger that should be directed at capitalism and neoliberalism, and instead tell all of their viewers, the elites are implementing an agenda that calls for social credit, which personally I think is a bad idea, even in a communist state. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that idea that China has. Nope, don't agree with it. It would be even worse under capitalism. They don't want the working class to own anything. They want everything to be controlled and owned by the elites and their associated private corporations and financial institutions. They want to disarm the public, and they want a one-world globalist system because the elites are communists. Despite themselves wanting to privately own everything. Where does that make sense? That is not communism, folks. This is bourgeois capitalism on crack. This whole crisis is disaster capitalism. Bourgeois disaster capitalism on crack. Big Pharma, Silicon Valley, the medical establishment, and the financial institutions which underwrite all of it, this is all done in the name of profit, shutting down competition, disempowering the working class and the small business owner. The inflation is price gouging done by the 1% to extract whatever remaining capital the 99% has after they were thrown out of work or fired for not getting the shot, lost their homes, their normality. They are financially squeezing you until you turn purple. That is not socialism. That is capitalism. But do not tell that to Tim Pool and Luke Rudakowski, because they work for the elite. Yeah, they work for the elite, but they attack the elite all the time. They work for the elite. Why else would they blatantly misdirect you into attacking communism when the elite, the so-called elite that they talk about, are not communists? Now to address the so-called useless left. For 2 years, you have been defending the profit motives of the 1%. You have been defending the narrative put out by 1% owned media, universities, think tanks. You have shrieked, "Stay home, save lives." You have distorted social justice, which was used to help historically marginalized people, and instead use social justice as a means to marginalize people who do not buy into the program. And no, it's not just white misogynistic people. Get that through your thick skulls. All you have done these past 2 years is obnoxiously scream about masks, scream about cases, scream about deaths, scream about getting shots. By the way, not for nothing, if you disbelieve capitalist institutions relative to death tolls affixed to Mao Zedong and call it Western propaganda by capitalist-owned historians and university professors, why would you allow yourselves to be propagandized by those very same institutions some leftists you turned out to be? You have made no peep about, to make it an issue that the 1% made some $5 trillion off this pandemic. You have made no peep about wanting to help the 50 million people who lost their jobs, their businesses, and their homes in 2020. For the greater good. You have made no peep about wanting to help anyone rebuild their lives. You have made no peep about standing up for those who got fired for their personal medical choices. You have made no peep, no effort whatsoever to get beyond your own little bubble and meet people halfway. What you do instead is cancel people, cry wolf all the time, and call them fascists or whatever when they begin to stand up and defend themselves and for, not going along with your program, which, by the way, actually, you think it's your program, but it's not your program. It is the program of the 1%. We are the 99%. We are the 99%, except for when we're not. So riddle me this, Batman. So all these so-called law-abiding citizens, the conservatives, the MAGA crowd, the Blue Lives Matter crowd, finally in 2020, they start taking to the streets. Finally, they engage in withholding their labor. Finally, they storm government buildings. Finally, they start fighting the cops. Finally, Middle America is starting to resort to direct action to stand up to the 1% who they think is communist. Oh my goodness, we have a breakthrough. The same people who during Occupy Wall Street told you to stop breaking the law and go get a job, and they're now doing the very things that you did during Occupy. And what did you do? What did you do? Did you bother to reach out to these people and say, hey, look, we have a common enemy here. Let's meet halfway. Did you bother to do that? No. Most of you did not. Especially you, Jason Unruhe. Instead, what you did was decide to label such a prospect as a red-brown alliance and label anyone from the so-called left who wants to meet people halfway as fascist. And then during the George Floyd incident, you allowed yourselves to be coaxed by the liberal establishment to unleash your, justified, because, police brutality and police racism is a thing, but misdirected rage at all these communities outside of Minneapolis, devastated by lockdown measures and lockdown economics. And what did you do? You destroyed them. Just so BlackRock could come on in and buy entire devastated communities on the cheap. Right? You sided with the mainstream capitalist liberal political establishment. The same establishment that literally had the cops crack our heads open and had us arrested for screaming, fuck Monsanto, at the top of our lungs 10 years ago. But you know what? Jason Unruhe, Canada's own Jason Unruhe, and all these other leftists or Maoists, they don't remember that because they weren't old enough, or they watched from the sidelines with the rest of the liberals. During a time when the original nonpartisan, anti-establishment, anti-corporatist spirit of Occupy Wall Street, before the DNC and progressives and the nonprofit organizations came in and destroyed that spirit, was needed. At a time when it was needed the most, it wasn't there. You know what happened instead? You let misinformed half-wits like Tim Pool and Luke Rudakowski and all the other anti-government, anti-socialist half-wits on YouTube and BitChute, like Styx Hexenhammer, redirect that legitimate anger that working people had at the liberal political establishment who works for the 1%, not China, and you let them make a movement which should have been yours to direct from the get-go about fighting communism. When it comes to the West, it's not communism that is imposing mandates and lockdowns and boosters and social distancing. No, it's not communism that's doing that. It's the technocratic capitalist class of the 1% that is doing such, and you were siding with them. You are currently more right-wing than the people who you are labeling as right-wing extremists, and you don't even realize it. That is profoundly disturbing. We are at a crossroads here. Our social and materialistic conditions are on the precipice of deteriorating rapidly. Polarization, atomization, segregation, alienation, it's everywhere. The supply chain crisis and inflation are going to intensify dramatically in the oncoming months. Everybody on one side feels left behind and hates the other side who feels left behind for leaving them behind, and vice versa. If we are going to collectively survive, we have to come halfway and come to an understanding with each other. The anti-government folks need to swallow their pride and understand that this is not communism that we are dealing with here. This is disaster capitalism at its worst. The lefties need to swallow their pride, and in the case of Jason Unruhe, he needs to shut the fuck up and admit that the anti-government folks are mostly right about this particular issue. They're just horrifically misdirected by half-wits who don't know what they are talking about half the time. We need to stop the race baiting, the fascist jacketing, the passive-aggressive nonsense. This is all irrelevant at this point. This is not a left-right struggle. This is a 99% versus 1% struggle. And the 99% cannot stand up to the 1% if the 99% is fighting among themselves. A new, nonpartisan grassroots movement consisting of people from all stripes and all philosophical persuasions, even the philosophical persuasions that we don't agree with, they need to come together. They need to stand up to both the neoconservative establishment for trying to push us into another war with Russia or China, and the liberal establishment for ignoring the working class while pretending to be socially progressive to advance the ends of the 1%. Enough is enough. So when the Freedom Convoy comes to the United States, do not let or be fooled by the mainstream media establishment telling you that all these people are fascists when they aren't. And do not let them convince you that Joe Biden is doing the bidding of China or the globalists. Actually, he is doing the bidding of the globalists, but they're not communist. No, he's not doing their bidding. Our enemy is the 1%. Our enemy is corporate America and every Republican and Democratic office holder who works for them and not for the people. This is a much bigger issue than the issue of mandates and censorship and digital IDs and medical passports. So much bigger than that. This is about coming together and doing whatever it takes to reclaim our normality and our autonomy from the monopolistic parasites who want to own all of it. We are not left. We are not right. We are the 99%. And we have to come together if we want to take back what belongs to us. This is Comrade Pella, signing out.